So I'll just go straight to introduction. So first I'll define intermediary. So an intermediary is a liaison or a broker between an individual or a group of people and a group or a source of information. In ICT 4G, intermediaries have been considered as an option to provide access to technology and information to those who do not have their own technologies and therefore help to bridge the digital divide. Intermediaries have been used to provide information to communities, access to ICT for ICTs, for communities to access and use mHealth as well as e-government services. In this study, we're interested on how maternal clients who do not own mobile phones use intermediaries to access mHealth internet. Despite the global the growth in mobile phone ownership globally, mobile phones still remain far from universal. So women in low and middle income countries are less likely to own a mobile phone. And the most affected areas are South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And women in these areas are 28% and 15% likely to own a mobile phone. So therefore, it is likely that the maternal clients, especially in rural areas, may not own a mobile phone, which means they will be used to access maternal mHealth intervention. Therefore, mHealth intermediaries may enable such women to use So most studies done so far has focused on feasibility, implementation, adoption, and use of enhanced technologies. Others have faced the use of online health intermediaries. However, little is known about the factors that affect the use of enhanced intermediaries. So our focus in maternal health was driven by its significance in SDG 3.1, and the study posits that a range of factors affect the use of intermediaries and consequently affect the use of maternal mHealth internet. Therefore, our research question was, what factors affect rural-based clients, maternal clients' use of mHealth intermediaries in maternal health? To answer this question, we use the case of Chigona, which was an mHealth intervention for maternal and child health that was implemented in Malawi. So, intermediaries in this intervention were community volunteers, family members, as well as community members who provided a connection between the mHealth intervention and the maternal clients who do not own mobile phones to access it. So a brief summary of the case study. So Chigona was piloted in one of the districts, Baraka district in Malawi in 2011. And Baraka district had low performance in maternal and child health issues. So that's why the district was chosen. And the district also had low mobile phone ownership. So at the moment in Malawi, mobile phone penetration is about 33.2%. So for urban, it's about 72.3%, and rural, it's about 37.3%. So the initial component of Chigona phone was the toll-free line as well as tips and reminders. So after the pilot phase, the Chigona phone was scaled up to all the districts in Malawi, and it was handed over to Malawi government in 2018, and now the intervention is available 24/7. So after the pilot phase, tips and reminder component was replaced by pre-recorded voice messages. so that everyone can access them using the IVR system when they call the 1243 number. The intervention recruited about 400 community volunteers, and each village was assigned a community volunteer to act as intermediary in those villages. And the project provided mobile phones to these community volunteers, but other community members as well as family members were also being used as intermediaries by maternal clients. Methodology. So the study used the qualitative research methods, and we used the case study research design, and we focused on maternal clients who do not have mobile phones. So these maternal clients were the minority of the population of maternal clients who used the intervention. Data was collected in 3 phases. The first phase was collected in January 2019, and we used secondary data. So we got documents from the implementing agency, as well as we searched for other documents on the internet, as well as we searched for peer-reviewed articles on Google Scholar, as well as Web of Science databases. And the key terms that we used was chipatarachapaphone, maternal M-Health, maternal health, M-Health intervention in Malawi. The second phase was some structured interviews, and we had interviews with maternal clients as well as intermediaries, and we used the COLAS database of chipatarachapaphone to identify the owners of the mobile phones, and then ask them to call them to identify the maternal clients who were using the intervention on their phone, and we had we interviewed both of them. And also during those initial calls, we were able to identify community volunteers whom we asked to identify the maternal clients, so that we could have focus group discussions with them, and we were able to have 2 focus group discussions, 2 different villages, one with 7 women and the other one with 8. Data was analyzed also in 2 phases. So we had document analysis, which helped us to come up with a case study to understand chipatarachapaphone, and also some data was triangulated together with the empirical data. In this one, we used thematic, inductive thematic data analysis. So this is a clearance. So first of all, we obtained permission from the implementing agents of chipatarachapaphone, Malawi Ministry of Health, as well as Baraka District Health Office, for us to use the chipatarachapaphone case study, as well as the Baraka District, our area of study. And we also obtained ethical clearance from the National Health Services Research Committee in Malawi, who gives ethical clearance to all health-related research. And upon interaction with the maternal clients, we sought consent from them, and we talked about issues of privacy as well as confidentiality. And when the consent was sought, we were able to interview them. These clients, so the maternal clients we interviewed were not pregnant, so our sample did not include pregnant women because we wanted to avoid risk associated with pregnancy if the maternal client had experienced a maybe traumatic event when using. So findings. So our findings, of course, apart from just looking at how the intermediaries affected the use, how the use of intermediaries affected how maternal clients access the intervention. We also find that the intermediaries were doing a lot of activities as well as they had different roles. And of course, this is not part of this study, so we'll just go straight to the factors that affected the. Yeah. So our findings suggest that even though the maternal clients were finding a lot of difficulties, that they still use the intervention because they perceived the intervention as valuable, as well as some of the factors that affected the use of intermediaries were the characteristics of the maternal client, the social environmental factors, as well as the characteristics of the intermediaries. So I'll go to the characteristics one by one. So the perceived value of the intervention. So even though the use of intermediaries were associated with some social costs, for example, negotiating the usage of the mobile phone because maternal clients had to use specific intermediaries for maternal issues. So they had to negotiate usage for that, as well as they were obligated sometimes to give you this just to thank the intermediary. So besides that, the maternal clients perceived the intervention as valuable because they perceived the information to be useful as well as quality information. Other studies also, for example, in Ghana, found that perceived value, quality of information, for example, was identified because the maternal clients knew that the information was originating from the health professionals. So the proposition of this section is stated as when healthcare clients without own mobile phones perceive the intervention as valuable, they are more willing to use enhanced. And the other factor that affected the use of intermediary was the characteristics of the maternal clients, and this was the level of literacy as well as social acceptability of pregnancy. So for levels of literacy, those maternal clients with low literacy, they were depending on the intermediaries to operate the mobile phone on their behalf, while those with high literacy, they were just using the phone without seeking help from the intermediaries. On social acceptability, most in rural areas of Malawi, for example, when the teenager got pregnant out of wedlock, these teenagers are stigmatized and even they can be cast out of their families. So even though the health intervention may offer opportunities for such women to get medical information without dealing with the trauma or stigma that they are going through, the use of intermediaries kind of discourage these type of women because they have to go through someone to access the intervention. Therefore, it is advisable that intervention should make deliberate efforts to reach out to women who may be excluded from accessing the proposition for this is when a society does not accept circumstances surrounding maternal client pregnancy, maternal clients may not be comfortable to use intermediaries in that society. Next, we have characteristics of the intermediaries. The study found that demographic characteristics such as gender and age affected the use of intermediaries. So, for example, if the intermediary is male or if the intermediary is young, the maternal clients would not use those. So, in most cases, maternal clients would prefer older women. So, in villages, older women are perceived as custodians of health-related information in their community or matters in their community. The other one is pregnancy is something that people would keep it as a secret. Maternal clients would prefer to talk about their pregnancy with someone whom they trust. So if the intermediary is not trustworthy and the maternal client maybe had an experience, a bad experience with the intermediary, it means they will not using that type of intermediary. And the other one is likelihood of the availability of the mobile phone. So mostly, if a maternal client traveled to an intermediary and found that the battery is not charged, the phone has malfunction, and so on, the maternal client will not or discouraged the intermediary. And also the relationship between the client and the intermediary. So maternal client will use those people whom they trust, whom they have a good relationship, because they would not deny them access. So they would negotiate usage on their mobile phones for maternal related issues. So most maternal clients prefer their family members as well as community volunteers because they were assured of access of the mobile phone. So the proposition for this is when a client finds the characteristics of a maternal health intermediary not appropriate, maternal clients may not use that intermediary. And the associated proposition is the demographic characteristics of the intermediary may affect the maternal client's use of intermediary. And when the intermediary is trusted and more likely to be available for the maternal client would use. And lastly, social environmental factors. So the perceived privacy as well as availability of the intermediary affected the use. So on perceived privacy, maternal clients were more comfortable to use health intermediaries whom they believe will keep their pregnancy private, or whom they believe they will not compromise their pregnancy, as well as the use of personal identification number to retrieve their messages was one way of securing their messages. So they were happy with that. So that is why we found that most maternal clients would not prefer SMSs or pushed voice messages. As a result, they prefer the interactive voice response type of personalized messages because no one would listen to their personal messages. Availability of the intermediary. So since maternal clients will travel long distances to have access to the intermediaries, and if the intermediary is not available, maternal clients will be discouraged to use those intermediaries. And the proposition is when maternal clients are affected by the social environmental factors, maternal clients may find it difficult to use and hence. So in conclusion, there are still inequalities in mobile phone ownership in rural settings, and the poorest among the poor still face challenges in accessing mobile phone mediated interventions that are meant to serve them. So the use of shared mobile phones has the potential to mitigate these challenges. So the third point is the need of managing the intermediary the limitations and recommendations. So intervention should acknowledge that there are people within the communities who serve as intermediaries, and they should make sure that they should leverage that system instead of resenting the wheel. So we are proposing that traditional system may offer a good starting point for designing a system which will work for those communities. And the other challenge that we noted was that there was a volunteer fatigue. So managing volunteer system in a way that would reduce the burden on the volunteers would ensure sustainability of the volunteers. For example, if drug systems are used, for example, basic mobile phones, a lot of people will act as intermediaries. So family members, neighbors, what? So all of them will act as intermediaries. So the burden on the initial intermediaries will be reduced, as well as the internet should be able to provide things like power banks as well as mini solar panels to make sure that the mobile phones are available all the time. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.